Let's get ready to talk about role-playing games and role-playing game design and other related topics.
Rolls trippingly off the tongue.
It does. Just experimenting with new ways to intro.
Yeah, no, that's good. We definitely shouldn't have any kind of standard intro.
No.
Which I suppose is a good way to get into welcoming people to the show. Hi.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Unwritten Earth Symposium, the podcast version.
Mm-hmm.
You're listening to me talk to my good friend Epidiah Ravachol about games and game design and related matters.
And you're listening to me talk to my good friend Nathan Paoletto. Okay, hold on. I got to stop here. Do you want the D? I did not.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Would you like to rephrase?
No, we're good. Let's get it. Let's just keep going. We're professionals. We keep a very academic tone here.
Yes, yeah, as befits the symposium. I think at this point you do not need to pronounce the middle initial of my name. We're all
Right.
friends here.
Yeah.
It's more my byline than how I demand to be addressed.
Well, that's good. That's good. After all these years, I finally answered that question.
Near the end of my grad school days, there were a couple people in my class that just referred to me as NDP, and I like that. That's not the
That's
worst
good.
thing
Yeah,
about it.
I dig it.
Yeah.
I like that we both have, I mean, obviously yours is the traditional, but like you're recognized as your initials. And I can use the EPI version of Epi to refer to myself. And so we can both play like 80s arcade games and end up, have instantly identifiable best scores. That's important.
My go-to 3-letter initialism for my like handle when I'm playing a game, like a digital game or something, it's usually not taken. So unless it's required to be longer than 3 letters, I have a nice go-to. So that's a nice feature.
And that's important in role-playing games.
Mm-hmm.
So this is our, how long have we been at this? This is month 2.
Oh.
Well, no, I mean like the Unwritten Earths.
Yeah, no, we're in month 2.
It might be month 3, right? Because did we start in November or just we started releasing in December, but like
we started getting everything together in December. I don't remember when our actual first recording was. It was either November or December. It doesn't really matter. This is going to be our 5th or 6th episode, something like that.
Okay, we got this down pat now. We know what we're doing.
So I mean, and we ignored the 130 odd episodes of 200 a day that we did,
right?
Where we had this same thing just about the Rockford Files. I
mean, honestly, the first 20 of those are role-playing game. Like we do talk about role-playing game things. We could consider those. It's our Maverick.
Yes.
If we consider this our Rockford Files, that's our Maverick.
If we would be so blessed as to have that be true, that this is our Rockford Files. Ooh. Anyway, yeah.
So, well, okay. So
what's up?
Let's talk.
How's it going?
I'm a little late today, so that the listeners of the show can know that it's my fault that we're a little off. But I had a lovely discussion with our friends, the Bakers, this morning, so that was fun.
Oh, nice.
Should we just jump into our homework?
Yeah, let's kick off with homework because we've been on a homework break. So this is actually our first homework in a couple episodes.
Homework back from the break. Yeah.
So let's go ahead and do that. I will drop in the clip of our assignment for this homework from last episode right here.
This came from one of the scholars on the Discord, Fred, who sent us a link to a bot on Mastodon, a Mastodon bot at botsin.space at random color contrasts. Pick a day and a time to check, that's now, and at the appointed time, look at the most recent set posted on the random color contrast bot in Bots in Space. The rule book to pick will have the spine and or cover that most closely matches that color set. So Bots in Space provides 2 contrasting colors. The most recent one on my screen is One of my all-time favorite color contrasts.
For our purposes, we should further randomize which one we're picking, right?
Right. Yes. Should we roll a die and count down that many?
Sure. Let's do that. I counted down 14 posts on this bot, and my color combo is Purple Heart and Pale Prim, which is kind of actually very similar to the Unwritten Earth's purple. And a kind of a pale yellow combo. Yeah. For the record, Purple Heart is code 7156E0, and Pale Prim is FFFBB8.
That is a pale color. I could tell by the hex code. I got Violet Eggplant and Starship, which is like a violet purple and a limey green. I would say a radioactive green. It's the kind of, if you're like, hey, we're gonna name a green starship, that's the kind of green you're looking at, and that is Violet Eggplant is 9E40BF and Starship is E1F950.
And we're back.
Yes. So what'd you get? We had fairly similar colors.
We did have kind of similar palettes. Yours was a little more dramatic of a difference. Yeah. And mine was more, I guess I could look it up to talk about it if I need to.
No. I want to see the book.
Right. The first thing was that, ironically enough, when I went to my shelf, the first thing that I found was the print edition of The Shadow of Yesterday that I forgot I had.
Okay, yeah.
One of the lavender colors on its spine is almost exactly the purple from mine. And I was like, oh, okay. Anyway, so I disregarded that as my homework. And I hunted around and I found something. This is the zone of, this is a podcast. You listeners don't know what we're looking at by definition. Yeah. But yeah, I was kind of like, what jumps out at me? That combination of what feels like it's in the realm of what I'm looking for, and then what is like good for homework, right?
Right.
So I ended up pulling out a game I'm pretty excited to talk about. I'll lift it up here so Epi can see it. This is Necronautilus.
Oh, yeah.
From the world champ themselves, Adam Vass. Yeah. Cover, actually, I assumed that Adam had illustrated the cover, but the cover is actually by your friend and mine, Shell.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, gorgeous.
It's pretty sweet. So, yeah, it has this, funky purple spine, and then when you pull it out, it has some of the yellows and greens on the cover were in the realm of my other color. So, yeah. I was like, here we go. The cover is a dope science fantasy phantasmagoria. There's kind of like, there's like cosmic fantasy going on. There's like this kind of you can look it up on the internet. There's this like kind of red figure with all these globes of glowing gas kind of going into them, and it's on top of a spaceship, and there's like space worms and some kind of weird planetoid, and it's all in space, and there's it's a foil embossed metal band style logo that Necronautilus over the front that Adam did design that. Disclosure, I guess. Adam did art for my most recent project. They illustrated the wrestlers in Warlock Pro, right, which was awesome, and I was excited to have a chance to highlight an Adam Vass joint. This game is from 2020.
I was going to say, I remember getting it in the mail. And if I remember getting it in the mail, it has to be within the past 5 years.
Right. Yeah, I think it was one of those, I think it was a Kickstarter that was launched prior to the pandemic and then fulfilled during the pandemic, I believe. The premise of this game is that you are a death agent. You are a cloud of gas that is going out on missions on behalf of death, which is kind of an elemental force as opposed to like an embodied person, right? As it says on the back. Channel powerful words and memories to enact your will on the galaxy, carry out missions on behalf of the blind god Death, discover new planets, destroy menacing threats, determine who you really are.
Well, I will.
The one-liner is that it's a kind of like a stoner metal space fantasy game.
Yeah. I can hear the song that is like an hour and a half long. It's just a single song, the same riff over and over again. Very slow. Yeah.
Vibrating your internal organs.
Yeah.
I'd read it when I got it, but I haven't played it. And it'd been a while, so I sat down and gave it another read. It's a fun book to read. It's very, visually maximalist kind of, the thing that Adam is good at. Adam is good at many things. One of the things that Adam is good at. Yeah, there's a lot of choices here. I do think that it is a game where I'll need to play it to really get...
Sure, yeah. Like what the magic is.
Yeah, exactly. Like I know there's something here, but I'll need to play it to kind of see what it is for me that jumps out and is like, this is the gestalt of like all these cool elements. Like, what does it actually like hit, at the table? So maybe once I play it, I'll have something else to say. But I think from the read, what I'd like to talk about is the premise of how characters are made and what drives resolution, which is words. So it's a word-based system where your death agent is defined by words, and there's lots of like tables you can roll on and lots of stuff to pull stuff, but you can also just decide what words you want to define your agent. And then there's a GM, and so the GM like sets up the challenges that face you on each planet. And so when you land on a planet, there's going to be some kind of challenge, and then you're kind of like, what do you want to do? You can go from there. And so when you're facing challenges, in order to roll dice, you pick a word off of your sheet, and you have some that are like part of your character, and then you have some that are essentially gear that are like one use. So that's pretty cool. So you could maybe one of my character ones is like, I don't know, resplendent, right? And so that's something I'm going to be bringing. So when you use the word, you're kind of describing like, why is what's happening right now resplendent, right?
That's good. Yeah.
And then maybe I have a one-off word that's like, it could be very utilitarian. Like one of the words in my stock is like axe. So like over here, I have an axe or whatever. Or it could be, rainbow or memory or, whatever.
Right.
So you have some options. And then the system is, so the words that you have a number. And then when you are using your word, you're rolling some dice. You're trying to beat the number. It's roll under. So you're trying to, higher numbers are better. But if you roll equal to your number, your word shatters and you make a new word out of it by rearranging you take the letters that are in it and you turn that into a new word. And the rules are great because it's like spelling doesn't matter. Like it should, like once you get to that stage, like you're not trying to find the best fit. It's more come up with something, and then like if it's missing a vowel or like whatever, that's fine. Like as long as we kind of know what it's supposed to be. And then letters you don't use in that refactored word affect your life, which is like a number that keeps that tracks like your journey between being a totally in the service of death to like getting to the point where you kind of remember your life before you became a death agent, and maybe you exit the story that way. So
all right, I'm digging this. I'm in. Like, I obviously backed the Kickstarter and got it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had a story about receiving it in the mail. But I had forgotten the point of this exercise is that I have more games than I can fit in my brain here, and as do most of us. But this is giving me the itch. I'm digging.
It's the good stuff. I remember the kind of the pitch for the game being this like word-based thing, and I'm like, that sounds pretty cool. I'm interested to see what that actually is. And it still sounds pretty cool. Like I said, I think I need to play it and see exactly what hits for me. So one thing I like is that that's like pretty out there. A conceptual framework that I need to adjust to be like, to kind of think about how it works and how I would see it in play. But it's in a scaffolding of stuff that's very like tried and true, familiar stuff. So like, you essentially, like the GM has like essentially principles, kind of PBTA style. Mm-hmm. Like, here's what you do as a GM. Here's what you're trying to achieve. Challenges are dealt with clocks. So like when you get successes, you're ticking down clocks, and that's how you know when you overcome stuff. There's lots of procedural tables for doing stuff in space and then doing stuff on the planet. So like all that stuff is very like, okay, cool. Yeah. Like that's all stuff that works. It comes from other games. It is technology that we know fits together well. And then that's all around this like, okay, because here's the thing that's like, I need to explore and play. So that balance is nice as well. So I think just like a truly arcane gem. Like words are the medium of play, right? So like this game is very specifically saying, what if we actually use the thing that we use to play, the words themselves, and mechanize that in a way that is a little more elemental than the other reference point here that immediately comes to mind is Ars Magica and like, using words to create magic, create spells.
There was a game, the form factor was really cool. It's like this tiny book. I cannot remember the name of it, and I'm looking over at my shelf and I don't see it immediately. Oh, wait, hold on. I got a tiny book section of the shelf. No, I don't see it immediately. I'm not going to spend time looking for it. Anyways, it was that era of game that was meant to be played over chat. And by chat, it was like IRC or AOL.
I feel like I know this game, Code of Unaris? Is that?
That's it. Yeah, or something like that. I knew there was like a proper noun, a fantasy proper noun that I don't know off the top of my head. But yeah.
Yeah, Code of Unaris, Gold Leaf Games.
And that one didn't work at all like this, but it definitely did the same thing of like, hey, we're chatting, so we have a record of our game. So here are powers that let you remove words from what has already been said about the world, or, like somehow alter the record, which was kind of neat. Is a neat experiment into like dealing with our medium of communication rather than. It reminded me of it in that they're both playing in nearby playgrounds. I don't think the two are that closely related at all. But
I was just pulling up there's a review from you remember John Kim and John Kim did Darkshire.net is the website, and he did a bunch of reviews, and he ran the Indie RPG Awards. Yeah, as long as they were around. I think they kind of faded out.
That's a good question.
We can look that up. Anyway, there's a review here, and because I was trying to remember also what kind of the thing was, and it's in this game you have hacks and you have points that you spend on hacks, and when you make a hack, you change a word in the text that like has just been typed. In this review, it says it's within the last 10 seconds. So I guess it's like for real time play.
This is orthogonal to our homework. Let's bring it back to
Necronautilus.
Great name and wonderful. In the same way that there are a lot of metal bands where I only really know them by their font. This game it has a similar thing going. I would love to. We should play it at some point. Is what we should do. You and I should figure that out.
Yeah, it can be 1-on-1 up to like full 5 or 6 people. So
yeah, it feels like one of those that like you need to get people who are. I don't want to categorize. I don't want to invent categories of players because I mean, last time we talked about like one of the great blunders being arguing about genre on the internet. Another great blunder is categorizing player types. But there's certain people who are interested in experimenting with this kind of thing, and I would love to find a couple more people like that. And
the other thing in here that I highlighted for myself, but is directly related to this, is so there's a safety section, and in there is a tool called CATS. I feel like this must come from somewhere. I'll look it up, and if there's more, if there's a reference, I'll put it in the show notes. But CATS stands for Concept, Aim, Tone, Subject Matter. And the rule is before diving into play, go over these with each player to ensure everyone's on board and knows what they're signing up for. And so, and then it lists a paragraph or, a couple sentences, the concept of the game, the aim, the tone, and the subject matter. And so they're very specific for like this game. And I think the idea here is like, go through this stuff so that everyone at the table is like, yes, let's do all that. And if someone is like, that doesn't sound fun, then they're not going to get engaged, right, by what the game is trying to do. And the game is not wasting time, effort, or design space on how do I pull the person who's not engaged into the world? Like, that's not
right. Yeah.
This game is very much like, oh, are you excited about this premise? Then, let's go.
Yeah. Honestly, if the cover hasn't sold you, design for the audience you want.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That's a hard-won lesson, I would say.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like designing defensively against people who are not going to like your game.
Right.
Isn't a good use of your time.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's Adam Bass, World Champ Game Co. Link in the show notes. Necronautilus.
That's good stuff.
Great homework pick from our color-based assignment.
Should I dig into mine then?
Yeah, what you got?
All right, I went a different route.
Beat that.
I can't. This is where we went. All right, so I had very similar green and purple situation, and this game had the advantage that as you look at the spines or whatever, it had far more square footage than most other games. And I have in my hands the 2012 edition of Gamma World.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
And this, I'm holding up a book for Nathan. It's a tiny little book. It's not tiny, but it's a small. But it came in a box, right? And there's the green and purple. So this game is 2012. This is in the middle of 4th edition D&D,
and it is a Wizards of the Coast game.
Yeah, and it uses 4th edition D&D rules for the most part, right? Like it's to the point where I think you would be pretty safe to pull monsters out of the monster manual from D&D at the time and throw them at these guys, which is actually kind of the deal. Gamma World is a setting of I'm guessing multiple apocalypses. It's a post-apocalyptic setting where like a lot of weird stuff happens. Should I talk about 4th edition D&D? And maybe I shouldn't. If you know about 4th edition D&D, right? It was a departure from earlier D&Ds. It did some really interesting, neat things, and people hated it for that.
I feel like there was just from living through it, in retrospect, I feel like at the time, a lot of designers were like, oh, cool. D&D's actually like doing something that is like...
Right. It's doing something interesting.
That's interesting and actually like supporting the kind of play that it's advertising, like that kind of stuff. But people who had been playing D&D did not like the changes because, well, I can't say why. In particular, but like I noticed a pretty sharp split between the general player population that either was like, okay, cool, I'm on board, or was like very vocal about not liking it, and then general designers in my orbit who are like, oh, cool, this is a cool version of D&D, let's check it out.
And I think Gamma World, I don't think this is why it existed, but like I think it ended up being the compromise there, where it has the rules and does those things, and D&D players are like, "Oh yeah, no, it's good for that game. It's just not good for my D&D."
Sure.
And so they can play it and enjoy Gamma World, because nobody has this. I shouldn't say nobody, but a lot of people don't have.
Gamma World doesn't have that same longevity. Like there was like because this was like the third.
It goes way back.
It hasn't evolved over the years with the same kind of like player base that has kept up with changing over time and stuff. All right. So the history and context aside, one of the reasons why I bring it up is because my job is to find an arcane gem in this, buddy. And one of the problems with that is that like my personal definition of an arcane gem is that no D&D can have it. It's the big one, right? Like it's like asking what is the most interesting thing you're doing. if you eat pancakes every day, and then it's like, right, what do you want for your birthday breakfast? It's like, well, I have pancakes every day and I like pancakes, but I'd like something else because I know everything that pancakes has to offer. Maybe that's a little tortured.
So this game is waffles.
Okay.
It's just a personal thing.
Sure.
Okay, so there's some interesting ways in which this diverges from that.
Yeah.
And I will say, I will make some characterizations here about design in general, and that is when there aren't stakes. When the stakes are lower, you have a chance to experiment with your design, right?
Sure.
We often find really interesting mechanics in comedy games because who's going to take them seriously? You know, that kind of thing. It takes that 4th edition D&D stuff, and it's like, we don't need to appease anybody in D&D. We don't have to. So, for instance, when you make a character here, you're not like picking your race and then picking your class. You're rolling on a chart that's character origins, which is just like android, cockroach, doppelganger, mindbreaker, speedster, rat swarm, gravity controller. Like it's a bunch of things, and you're rolling twice and you're smashing those two together.
And that's great.
That's good stuff. People would hate to do that with a D&D, right? Like with a D&D where you obviously our listeners will probably enjoy the idea of like you rolling on a chart and it's like elf, ranger, bard, dwarf, and you just smash them together. So you're like, I'm a wizard thief, right? And that's a possible thing in D&D. But anyways,
it's a different.
I'm going to stop with D&D. This is fun. I love like getting rat swarm and felinoid slammed together, and you're like, okay, I'm a swarm of cat rats, you know, that kind of thing. And you have like these powers that you unlock as you level up, and you get to choose which power from which is kind of a neat thing. It's like, here's a generic level up system, and you can plug these origins into it that like give you, you know, the game is a lot about having these combat encounters, which again is what that was in that era. So they're well designed, I think, for the most part. Like the critters that you encounter make you do interesting things, again, for the most part. I've played this game quite a bit over the past 13 years. Not a lot, but it keeps coming up every so often and be like, hey, let's have a fun game of Gamma World. All right. But I am eliding the bit.
Okay.
That bit is these right here. These deck of cards. So the company that brought you D&D and the company that brought you Magic the Gathering decided they were going to slam them together into a role-playing game that was not a fantasy role-playing game. You have these 2 decks here. One is Alpha Mutations and the other is Omega Tech, I think, or something like that. These are the Omega Tech as things you can kind of come across in the landscape of the world. You draw from the deck of cards, and I'm just pulling an example here. It's like Dimensional Shunt Shield, and that was hard to say. It's armor, and it tells you what it can do. The trigger effect, it works just like all these powers. And then if you're above a certain level, you can salvage it. So after you use it, it gets discarded because this is a post-apocalyptic landscape. Nothing is permanent. You discard it, but this has like a salvage thing. So like, all right, I used its power, but I can still use it for other things if I'm above a certain level or whatever. It's kind of a neat way to just have like changing things up. Alpha Mutations are along a similar route, but they're like ways in which the background radioactivity and all that changes your character from time to time. And they're like powers that you can use maybe once or twice in a combat. I don't remember exactly how all of these work, but it's a way to be like, oh, I got this extra power, this encounter, this is fun. I think they go away at the end of each encounter, and there's other things that can happen that can make them go away. So like use them or lose them kind of thing. But they have rules for deck building,
right?
Because their conception of it was you would buy these booster packs and you would put together these cards and build a deck of things you'd find in the world and the weird ways you'd mutate specific to your character. You don't have to play that way. You can use the cards that they have at the table as a general, which is how I've always played. But I mean, if I had to pick an arcane gem,
and you do, because that's our homework.
right? You're right. Yes, exactly. I do have to. I know that there was a cynical impetus for this, right? Like I know that this is, hey, this is how we're going to make more money off of whatever. But two things I want to say about that. Number one, don't buy it then. like this is what we were just saying about the other game. Like that, if the buy-in is like you have to keep collecting cards, and you're like, oh, I don't want to do that, then don't. Like that's fine. It's not being designed for you then. And number two, wait, did I have two things to say about that? Oh no, I think the other thing I just wanted to say is that I think it's kind of a neat way to bring that into it.
The cards and stuff, is that something where like as a player there's times where I'm like, oh, and now I get to draw a card and I keep it? Or is it like when you start an encounter, everyone gets a card? Like, where do they come from in play?
It depends on, like, the alpha and the omega have different, let me just, constructing your deck. Draw one alpha mutation card from your deck. If you're 4th level or higher, you draw 2, that kind of thing. That's at the beginning of the session. And then, but you can tap them, like using them or whatever.
Sure.
Whenever you roll a natural 1 during the encounter, you experience alpha flux. After your current action is resolved, discard one of your readied alpha mutation cards. This discarded card can be then draw a new card. So every time you roll a 1 on a d20, you have to discard one and draw a new one.
Okay.
And then the omega tech, I think, is like
more like stuff you like find as part of like
you
beat the mutanoids, and in their
find these
in their burned out van that they use as a base, there's like draw a card and you won't find whatever's in there.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's and there's like normal equipment rules for like other equipment you can have. Sure. This is the weirdo stuff.
So like the little deck lives with your character, and you get some cards out of it, and that might change over the course of a thing, and then every so often you like level up and get another card in your deck or something like that.
Well, the deck building rules and I like, there's certain things about it that, like, fictionally it's real easy to imagine alpha mutation deck building rules, because you're like, here are the ways they have like suits, right? Like one's bioenergy, one's dark energy, and one's a psi energy. And so you could be like, oh, I'm a psychic character, so I'm going to grab a bunch of psi energy ones or whatever. From the alpha batters, before the game session, each player constructs a deck to alpha mutation. Your deck must have a minimum of 7 cards, and you cannot include more than 2 cards that have the same name.
Oh, okay.
So, these are small decks, or they can be pretty small.
And it's a player choice of like, okay, this is what I want for this. That's cool.
But the game master has an alpha mutation deck that they also. So I think you could draw from either. I gotta be honest. I only skimmed these rules for the homework because I had played it before. But
no, that's fine. I guess I guess I'm asking because anytime we start talking about cards, I'm like, okay, there are a million different ways that these could be used. So like, I'm just kind of curious about what the vision of this, to launch off from the arcane gem. Like, there's a wide spread, right, from like you start your character with these 2 specific cards, and then as you play you're going to gain more cards from things, or at the start of every game draw a bunch of random cards and that's just your thing, or this like all the cards that you happen to own you get to pick some from, so that means if you want more choices you're gonna have to buy some more cards, but that's up to the group if they care about that.
There's quite a few games I have here that have cards, but the cards, there's nothing about the fact that they're cards aside from that being it's just information. Like you could just list them in a book. You can list the entries in a book and it would be fine.
Right. They're an affordance for making it easier to look at these individual things. Yeah.
And then there's games that have that, but also it's a little bit like, here's a unique power. So there's only 1 card of it, and here's like 3 cards. And so, and again, it's not entirely necessary, because again, you could just put it in a book and put check marks by it or something like that, or just say this is unique and only 1 player can have this at a time. We've all designed things like that. But this one definitely gets more into like an actual deck building situation where you're like, here's the group of cards that I want to bring to this session, and you might get alpha mutations from, like, you won't have complete control over it, right? Like, you might get some from the GM or whatever, but you have this, like, this ability to kind of say, my character's gonna have these wild mutations, but in this realm, I'm gonna, tuck it down. And like those origins that I talked about, they have synergies with like some of the style of you get bonuses to, like, if you're using a bio one, you get this bonus, or that kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess when you get into like design stuff, I get very interested in like what happens during play that gives you cards and what happens during play that demands that you use cards.
Yeah,
because I think that's where a lot of like fun choices can get made. And then the cards themselves, like, is it just that they're easier to use cards than a chart or a list? Sure. Or like, is there something about the proportions of them? When does it tip over into being more of, like you said, a deck builder? I guess there's also this idea kind of that like you could go to like the game store Gamma World night and you bring your character with your cards, and it's not that you're always in a persistent campaign or whatever.
And there's a little bit of like, I don't think it ever caught on like that. Like, I don't know, I have never heard of people doing that, but I think that like that was sort of a hope, maybe, or possible. Well, it's possible. Yeah, it had a lot of focus on here are how we do encounters, and so there was less sort of like play that comes from how permissible the DM is or GM is, or like, especially when it comes to combat, it feels locked in enough that you could have that experience of like, hey, I'm gonna go and I'm just gonna play this character here, and then I'm gonna play this character there. This actually might be a segue to another thing I came prepared to talk about. So should we follow it?
Let's follow it.
You can imagine this Gamma World thing almost becoming vaguely like a competitive thing, like Magic the Gathering is, or something like that. Like, come to our weekend-long convention. We have these GMs that are all going to run the same scenario, and whoever survives will get a $25 gift card or whatever, like that kind of thing. That is more plausible with a game like Gamma World than it is with like
Swords Without Master.
Well, with Necronautilus. yeah. Like at any of these games, at any of these indie games that we do. All right. That is a vision of what role-playing games could have been that I found in... So I've been reading this book called Hobgoblin. Hobgoblin is written by John, I think it's Coyne, Coyne. Let's just say Coyne, John Coyne. It was written, I don't know when it was written, but it was published in 1980. Copyright date's 1980. 1981, apologies. It takes place in the year 1980. And it's about a kid who, I'm not that far into it, so I can't really tell you. But there's a kid who plays this role-playing game called Hobgoblin. And he starts to suspect that it's real. We know this. This is a good story. The reason why I bring it up is because this role-playing game, Hobgoblin, is wild. It's 1981, early days yet. 73 probably was D&D, right? Somewhere in there. He is at a boarding school. He describes a scene where a bunch of kids at the boarding school are all in, like, I guess a study hall or some hall, and they're all playing role-playing games. He mentions that some of them are playing Dungeons and Dragons, some of them are playing Traveler, some of them are playing RuneQuest. So these are all like recognizable names. But most of them are playing Hobgoblin, which is this one that he brought to the school, and now the school is absolutely in love with it. Hobgoblin, instead of having a game master, has a dealer that deals cards. So we have the card mechanic. The dealer in the beginning of the story had just gotten a brand new deck of cards in the mail, so it had monsters that nobody had seen before, like newer challenges. The character plays a 25th level paladin who has never been defeated, which
sweet.
Right, this feels like someone who's never played a role-playing game writing about a role-playing game.
This has a very Mazes and Monsters vibe, where it's like about D&D, but not by anyone who had played D&D, really.
yeah. And I don't want to, I don't know the truth there. Sure. I don't know what John Coyne's been up to before or after, but the description of him and his friends, like one of his friends is playing a banshee, one is playing like a sea troll or something like that. Just like, oh my God, this is fun. Like, this is it. I'm in. And they all start in different areas, and they're told that they have to get to a thing in order to save the day. And then the dealer deals out what they have to fight in order to deal with, to get to that. And they're all coming from different areas. And there's something about this description that matches nothing I've ever experienced in a role-playing game, but I desire. This feels more like a fantasy board game.
Yeah.
Kind of feel to it or whatever. And then they start describing the dice. And this is the part that really clued me in. He rolled 3 pyramidal dice, picked up the pyramidal dice and tossed them down again on the battle board. 83.4. So I need to know. I really need to know about these dice. So it's a little wild, right? Okay. Obviously, all of us are thinking of the D4. The tetrahedron. It's not pyramidal, actually. Well, I mean, it's kind of, but like pyramids as we conceive of them generally have 5 sides, the bottom side being a square and the other 4 sides being triangles. Is this pyramidal, or is it just like a description of how do you get a decimal point? Is he rolling it like a percentile die?
It's 3 dice, right? So what if 1 is the first digit, 1 is the second, and the third one is after the decimal? At
some point he rolls, I think, like a something in the 30s, and another time he rolls like 112.
Sure.
What is going on? The story is told at this point in the book. There's like, they're telling his story, and then like some drama that's happening at home where his dad has a fever. So there's some kind of like, like when he rolled 112, is that his dad's temperature? Like, is there
correspondence between the game and like his real life or whatever?
Yeah. And then at one point he has to make a different kind of roll, and he picks up the cube dice.
Ooh, the cube dice.
And he rolls 2 of them, and he only has to roll a 4 or higher, but he rolls snake eyes. And now a couple things about this. And again, I don't want to, I'm actually partway through the book. I'm going to read it to the end. I will let you all know what happens.
Yeah, we'll get your book report when you're done.
But it really stuck out to me that the author described the dice by their shape and not by the number of sides that they had. Because like the cube dice, we know what those are. Those are D6s. Those are 6-siders. Those are just dice.
Right.
That is the standard dice. And the rolling of those.
He's seen regular dice before.
Yeah. Which of course he has. Like, in fact, he says snake eyes. That's from craps, right? Like you have this like, so yeah, there's like this whole understanding that, oh yeah, a 4 or more on 2 6-sided dice is an easy roll. But he fails it, But then this other set, these pyramidal dice doing these large numbers with sometimes with decimals and sometimes without. It's wonderful. I love it. Like I don't know how to
see if you can back solve into how you would do that with dice. Like, do you need a log scale? Do you need to do division? Like what's happening? Yeah.
It's fun.
Cool. Well, I look forward to hearing back about this potential path not taken with adventure games, right?
Yes. Wait, I'm sorry. I have to tell you the moment that like really stood out to me, which was something dramatic was happening and in the game, and our main character who's 15th level paladin was like had to make a roll in order to deal with this giant, and this room full of kids playing other role-playing games all quieted down and got up and came over to watch it happen. And I got it like, like if you've ever been to a convention, that literally never happens. To the point where there are games out there that I know of that are about being ostentatious and making like some loud noise when something exciting is happening. And everyone else is like, oh my, I'm having fun over here. Please get out of my face.
Keep it down.
Again, it's like, but what do I know? Like, I didn't go to a convention in the year 1980. I don't know what that, like, I've never been to a boarding school. Is it different there? Anyways, I just had to share that.
Yeah, no, that's great. This reminded me of a book that I read when I was probably like 9, 10-ish. Definitely something that I probably bought at the used bookstore next to the game store that I went to in Albuquerque at that time. Shout out to Page 12. That's the bookstore. The game store was I guess at that time it was Active Imagination.
Oh,
it was post War Games West. That's a whole story for a whole different time. Anyway, so this is a book called Witch and Wombat, and I'm sure that I bought it because it has wombat on it, and that was one of an animal I felt a lot of identification with at that time in my life. And I just looked it up, and apparently it's by Carolyn Cushman, Carolyn with a Y. Apparently this is the only book this person has published. There are no other titles that I can find under this byline, so I don't know what the story is there. Anyway, the story is about a witch and her wombat sidekick.
Oh, this cover that I'm looking at is amazing.
So there's a magical world and there's the real world. The magical world is in trouble. They have to generate like magical energy or something, and they're running out of it. So they're creating a portal to the real world that's framed as this high-tech amusement park where people who come to the park are in a virtual reality RPG. And so they go into this like room that's tricked up to be, I think they like lie down in like a bed and you get like a visor, like a whole head. And they're like, all right, now you're going into the game. But it actually magically transports them to the magic world. And there's like stuff that theoretically, I forget exactly the premise, but the point is the witch and her wombat sidekick are like the tour guide who, like, if you go into a virtual reality game and there's an NPC who's like, let me show you around town, right? To like,
right, yeah,
like the tutorial, right, kind of thing. But, but she's a real person, and she's been kind of like roped into this by someone, like kind of against her will a little bit, so she's kind of reluctant. And the group includes one guy who's a huge gamer nerd. So he's coming in and he's like, I have all these skills because I've played, it's not D&D, but like I've played role-playing games. But he's trying to analyze everything by game rules. So he's like, oh, right. Does that troll, like, how many hit points does that troll have? Should I attack it with my sword?
He doesn't realize it's real.
Right. And he's not supposed to realize it's real.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, you know, the plot of it is like this whole thing kind of dissolves and they find out that it's actually real, but then there's a real crisis and they can't get back. You know, it's as you can imagine. I remember it being pretty good. I was 10, so, you know, take that with a grain of salt. Anyway, there's this whole genre of like mapping what someone understands role-playing games to be onto a fictional thing where it's like, I don't know if you've ever actually played an RPG, but but that actually means that you can have more interesting stories sometimes, because like you're also not bound by like, well, four-siders are never going to get you a decimal. If that's in your brain, you're not going to write that scene.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I was drawn to Hobgoblin because
the cover's dope. Yeah.
Wait, hold up. There's a cover trick.
Oh, I was going to say, is that a severed head? But it's there's a cutout.
He's in the prison. He's in the dungeon, and now he's fighting with something.
Yep. Very good.
That's yeah. Yeah. And I like, it was like on a shelf for like $1, and I was like, yep, that's worth $1. I enjoyed that. But no, like I have several, like there's the what's his name? Joel Rosenberg did like the Guardians of the Flame, which was another, like, we play a role-playing game, but we got put into the world of the role-playing game. There's Cragkeep by Andre Norton, which I think is actually, I'm going to look it up. It was the first novel set in Gygax's world of Greyhawk. So it's officially a D&D thing. And I don't think she ever played role-playing games. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure. But, like, again, it has that same feel. There's another one. Well, anyways, there's a bunch of these. And I love them. And probably, am more interested in that topic than it would be if somebody was like, I am a role player and I'm going to write one about these. Because I think those exist, and there's quite a few of them. And that doesn't, like, I want that weirdness. I want the outsider view of what's going on. Oh, of course, the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon is a little bit like that too, which is why it's wonderful.
Well, thanks for this is our new book report segment.
Yeah, okay. I don't know if I can keep that one up. So here's the thing. We're still trying to get into the habit of the homework. I did not bring a way to assign homework this time because I had forgotten. I was too busy thinking about doing my homework this is why there are teachers and students, separate entities, right? Like somebody to come up with the task. Should we do one based on like a vibe? Should we be like what? Bring a game. It doesn't have to have been designed before this time, but like bring a game that you would have really wanted to play in the year 2007.
The problem with that is right. The problem with that is most of my games are from that time. Most of the games on my shelf are from that time.
Yeah. All right.
So that's good. How about this? What if it's more goal oriented? Like, let's bring a game that you think that you would use as someone's first game.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like with the like I'm going to sit down and play this or run this for you. This is what I think is a good introduction into playing these kinds of games. Let's
make it concrete. Can we say bring a game that you would make your mom's first game?
Okay. Yes.
Will this work? Is this a possibility, or is this?
Oh yeah, no, it's a possibility. That is not one of your games. That's not one of your own games.
No. Yeah.
Right.
That is definitely the danger zone there. Like some game on your shelf that you did not write, that I did not write.
Yeah, right.
That we, because I mean, we all know that the first game you would play with your mom is, I was trying to think of like some obscure game.
Is Dread.
Dread. Yeah, it's Dread. Everyone's going to teach your mom Dread. Teach your mom Dread, February is what it's called.
Yeah. There's two things in February. There's Zine Month and there's Teach Your Mom to Play Dread. One more thing is something that I could play with my mom, like because she's into detective stuff. Yeah. So, but yeah.
Oh, this is good. This is
shout outs to our moms.
Yeah, shout outs to moms, our moms in specifically moms in general.
Yeah.
This will be interesting to think through. And honestly, I will say this: if you are listening and you are in the Discord or online, tell us what game you would teach your mom.
I think we'll do our homework, but also if we could have a good roundup of like good games for moms.
Yeah.
We'll include that in our recording as well. Okay, sure. Let's do that.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
We should have saved it for like Mother's Day or something like that, but whatever. We're not good like that.
The lesson here is we should have some idea of our next assignment.
Yeah.
Before we sit down to record. All right, so we'll get some good games for moms, and we will talk about them on our next episode.
Speaking of the Discord,
yes,
I recently just told the Discord about this, and I'm going to share it with you now.
Yes, please do.
All right, so I was setting up to do a play test of my current work in progress. Due to illness, we didn't get a chance to play test, which is fine. We rescheduled.
This
happens.
Swords point south?
A sword point south, yeah. Yeah, it's singular, not like swords, which is plural. That's how you can tell my games apart. This is...
Well, I'm just we've mentioned it on the show before, so I'm just clarifying for our listeners.
Yeah. And leading up to that, I was like, okay, what I need to do here, and I've done this before. This is, I would call it a habit, except I don't do it often enough to be a habit. It's a thing I do. I decided to sit down and write out all the rules that the players need to know in a checklist format, so that when I'm talking to... we've talked before about how helpful conventions are for honing this sort of a way to teach games or to sell your games or whatever. Without that, you have to like really sit and think about it, right? Like, so I sat down, opened up a notebook, and I just started writing these out. And now that we have a podcast that we could just broadcast this to people, I want to broadcast that this is a lovely exercise. Like, if you can swing it, go for it, right? Like, writing it out by hand for me is different in the brain than typing it. Like, there's something about typing that is offers less resistance, so I spend less time with what I'm saying and talking about, right? If that makes any sense.
There's a thing from this was, there was kind of a pithy thing about it, but from design school about sketching instead of like doing everything on the like hand sketching instead of like always doing like renderings and stuff on the computer. Well, my professor said, which has always stuck with me, is like your hand is connected to your body your eye is connected to your hand, and your eye and your hand are connected to your brain, right? Like there's something about the physical motion of you have to be looking at it and moving your hand at the same time that creates connections with your brain in a way that looking at something and not looking at your hands doesn't. Synapses fire differently. There's a feedback loop that like we are evolved to take advantage of.
Yeah.
So like doing things by hand can just make your brain start in a way that sometimes typing or doing everything digitally doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah. And, like oftentimes early notes are just by hand because I'm just like writing down a thought and I have a notebook on hand. So this process, though, where I'm making a checklist, and I'm making a checklist specifically for the purpose of teaching the game to a group of people. And I want to just make sure I hit all the important rules, because I know if I don't have that internalized yet, I will wander all over the place and I will not deliver the game it won't feel like I'm delivering a game. It'll feel like you're just listening to Epi meander, right? Like, and that doesn't help us in any way. It doesn't help us test the game. It doesn't help me convince them that the game exists and is fun.
It's good for podcasting, but not necessarily for...
Yeah, exactly. And then in that process of doing that, you end up seeing things like, you see the larger, because one way we learn games, right? Am I going to go into a big discussion? Not yet. We've got a big discussion on the horizon here. But like, here's the thing: if I asked you to count how many rules there are in your game, you would not be able to do it, right? Because we can't quantify what a rule is. We're like, is this chunk a rule, or are these bits inside this chunk a rule, or are these bits inside those? You can't. We can't atomize it. Like, we can't say this is a rule, and we wouldn't want to. That would be boring.
Maybe if you did it for one thing, it wouldn't necessarily be the same a portion for a different thing. Like those categories aren't the same for each game, right?
Yeah. This is the same thing. Like if you're doing any kind of programming, like they're like lines of code or something like that. It depends on the language you're using, because some of those languages abstract a lot of processes down to like a single line of code, and that's fine. That makes you easier to think of. And we as human beings do that quite a bit with rules. Like we're like, here are the combat rules, and there's all these edge cases that we don't need to worry about right now, so we're not going to look at them. And so it comes down to we're just rolling dice and doing this bit, and also we know how the dice rolling goes, so I can pull that out. And so you end up like shrinking it down to this in your own mind, down to like a concept, and you're like, oh, that's nice, I could tuck that away. And now you're like, oh, this game only has 7 rules, but when you look at it, you know what? Classically, it's the tell me how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Yeah.
And no matter how you tell it, the person doing it can be literal enough to make it utterly impossible for you to do that. It's also Carl Sagan's to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first create the universe. But anyways, writing this out allows you to find that area where you're like, this is a thing that people need to know. This is not a thing they need to know right now. They could be taught this while the game's going on. And it allows you to like place these in these sort of cognitive chunks that are easier to package up, right? So you might write out, like, here, this game that I have is not a particularly complex game. I have 7 pages of checklist here, but each page is like one concept. If I was like, how many rules does this game have? I would be tempted to say 7 to 14 rules. Right. But it's a long list.
Would you say that the goal here is...
They're not giant pages either. I should point out.
Yeah, but you're writing very small.
Yeah, I am.
This is an exercise I mean, I should try it. I don't think I've done when I'm working out rules, I'll write things down.
Right.
I often will then do reorganization in like a, document. So I should try doing this. Do you feel like it's most useful for you in terms of like wrapping your arms around like, what am I actually talking about here?
Yes.
And like finding connections and stuff like that? Or is it for like finding these procedural ways of explaining rules, or both?
I think it's a little bit of both, but like, okay, let's contrast it here, right? Like sometimes, I mean, I also had this recent experience where I was talking about an old game of mine, and then I looked up the notes and I found out that I had them in InDesign.
Oh, right. Which I'm telling you, I might be able to help you with that.
I think I'd be able to get it out too. Okay. It's just a matter of like caring. And also I know if I look at those notes, they're going to be less than what I remember them being, right? But this is neither here nor there. The point is that like when you think about a game in the context of a layout, you're thinking about the physical object that you want, and that is important, and that's the thing that you want to do. But if you think about the game, like with what I'm doing here, at some point in your game's life, if it's going to be played, somebody's communicating the rules to somebody else, usually verbally, right? Like, you can write the rules down, but eventually someone has to teach them to their players or to a fellow player or, however, whatever that is. And so it's helpful to sit and think, how will that happen? What will that sound like? What would it be like to sit there while someone goes through these rules, right? Because I think we all have that experience and know that that's not the most pleasant of all the experiences role-playing games can give you. Mm-hmm. I am super eager to, like, obviously, like, we're doing a podcast wherein, for fun, we force each other to read other role-playing games. Right. We enjoy reading and learning rules, but like this moment where you're sitting at the table and you're about to start a game and somebody's like, okay, now I got to tell you about all the rules. Mm-hmm. It's not horrible, but it's just like, you need to, if you're the game designer, you need to think about that moment happening. Yeah. You don't necessarily have to write this part out in order, but like I've combined it with both writing it out by hand and also giving very deliberate thought to, I'll talk about this, and then I'll talk about this, and then I'll talk about this. And by the time we're here, we know enough to just get started. And let's go. And then you can look through it. Like I have in my notes here, there's like a moment where I write and I'm like, oh, this actually segues into starting the game. And I still have two other things to talk about. Let me move that around. Because I want that segue. I want that nice, like, okay, we're done with the rules. Now answer this question or, and like, there's a lot of ways that could be done. That could be part of character creation process. For me, like for some games, I'm like, during character creation, you're going to have to make some decisions. Yeah. In order to make those decisions, you need to know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So let me tell you the game, and now let's make the characters. And that's suboptimal. And there are ways to do it otherwise, but like especially early on in a game's life, you haven't figured that out yet. Yeah. You don't even know what the chunk of what the game is.
You're not quite sure what this is. Yeah, this again gets back to running early playtests and being like, not only are we playtesting these rules or whatever, I'm also trying to find out what do you need to know. What do what does the game, but right now me have to communicate up front so that you can make decisions that matter, right? It's not necessarily about like optimal decisions or whatever, but it's like, how do I give you the context so that as many decisions as you want to make at the beginning of this game matter, and as few of them are, that you're not doing things now that in half an hour you're going to be like, oh, this actually is never going to come up. Why did I do that? Or, oh, I thought that I was going to be able to do this, and that's not part of that rule. So, now I'm not sure if this thing that I launched my character off on doing is actually going to matter. How do we try and make sure that people are in the bounded, in the space of, it's not a good phrase, I was going to say in the space of meaningfulness. How do we make sure that the space is meaningful without like being really boring?
if I handed you a bunch of pyramidal dice,
right,
and I say roll them and divide them amongst Snuffle, Conkley, and Exploration,
right,
and you're like, there's no context.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what's happening here? Like, what am I doing?
Okay, yeah. So this branches off into a couple things, right, that I think we should consider for another day.
Future.
Right. Yeah. One is, just as a general topic, convention play culture and games that are disseminated as convention games. And so they're designed to do this, right? Where it's like, we hit the ground, here's the minimum thing you need to know, we get going.
Yeah.
That's a design space that not all games need to be in. So like, what does this conversation look like when you're talking about a game that is more of a I don't know, more of a we're going to play this for 6 months or a year.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So there's one thing. That was the main one. There was something else, but it'll come up again if it matters.
Yeah.
So we can talk about that another time.
Yeah. Just to kind of put the button on it, I just want to urge people to try this with your games as you're doing them. It's a lot of this stuff that we're going to say is just going to be hey, this is a thing that I've done from time to time and found useful. And
you might
I've spent some time thinking about what is our purpose in this space? And first of all, don't ever have those thoughts. Just don't. Those aren't fun thoughts. But second of all, I think largely it's just we enjoy designing games. We've picked up some habits. We've figured out some ways of doing things. And we think you probably enjoy designing games too. And you might enjoy or find these habits or ways of doing things useful.
I concur. So we're taking a look at some questions that we have, and they are good and I think worth talking about at greater meaty length than the time that we are going to have. So we're going to defer questions to the next episode.
Yeah, maybe next episode we'll have a good question focus.
Yeah. So if you have questions that you want to ask us, now is a good time to send those in. You can do that on the Discord. There's a link to that at our website, unwrittenearths.com. Or you can send us an email through the email link there, which I believe just goes to provost@unwrittenearths.com to ask us a question, or submit something through the podcast contact form over at unwrittenearths.fireside.fm. Yeah, I think that brings us into our final thing. I think we're ready to wrap up now.
We've got this bold bullet point here.
Yep, that's on the list, not forgetting the ending credits.
Don't forget to be professional about it.
Well, as you heard at the beginning of this episode, super professional. I will say quickly, we are finding ourselves in the welcome position of, at the start of an episode, being like, what do we have to talk about? And then at the end of the episode being like, oh, here's a bunch of things that we haven't been able to talk about yet.
Yes.
So that's nice. That's good. I feel like that's a sign of strength in
it bodes
in our
well
format.
For the future. Yeah.
It bodes well for the future. I will say that we are theoretically supposed to design some games. So that's another thing that I'm going to say on the episode now to keep us accountable to getting towards actually doing some of these game design challenges or efforts as we go forward.
Very specifically, we're supposed to trick each other into designing games, which is right now we're just enjoying talking about games. But yeah, I agree. We should get devious soon.
So if you have suggestions for deviousness, those are also welcome. All right. Well, the Unwritten Earth Symposium podcast is by us. Go us. As I said, you can find our website at unwrittenearths.com. You can find me at ndpdesign.com and Epi at dig1000holes. That's the number 1000.com. As always, Swords Without Master is in Worlds Without Master issue 3. Our music is by Will Yobst. Thank you, Will. Find Will at will.com everywhere the internet is sold. And as I was just saying, Epi, have we designed a game yet?
We're drifting too far away from that. We got to get back on track. No.